Welcome along to Obsession Engineering and Rapid Honda, because we're finally on to building our Supersport 600 CBR Hondas for British Supersport 2025. So admittedly, first day of the build is in fact, of course, a strip, because we have to take this complete lovely road bike apart and basically turn it into a massive pile of bits. And if I'm honest, we're doing this a little bit in advance of actually any of the parts turning up, because Bike Magazine needs some photos of us actually stripping this for one of the articles. And so we don't actually have many bits for the bike yet, but we're taking the first one apart so we actually have some photos for a magazine. So me and Rob, who is currently holding a camera, are going to crack on, rip the bodywork off this one, get some nice photographs, and then wait for some parts to turn up. For a Honda, this little CBR600 is actually pretty easy to take apart. Me and Rob on it, about half an hour, we had all the bodywork off. So there are a few oddities, I suppose. The airbox cover, the tank cover, and the first bit of the seat unit, they all come off as one big lump. So you would do a few fasters, then it just sort of all pops off the tank. The seat unit was literally 4 bolts, but then you've got to like get your fingers underneath it and like lever it out. The belly pan is a case of literally take the bolts out of it, little tweak, comes straight off. The side panels into the nose cone have got a couple of like little clips that you've got to like push the tabs in and push them out of the way. Not too bad, but you have to sort of lever it out a little bit. And obviously the shroud for the airbox, there's some like little like plastic pips that you have to just push in, and a few bits are slightly hidden, but realistically it's actually been about the easiest bike I've had to take apart recently. And as well as taking it apart, I've connected the battery up, I've checked that there's oil in it, I've checked there's fluid in it, water in it, and so we're going to chuck a litre of fuel in it and actually fire it up, because there is life on the dashboard. A couple of litres of fuel in, ignition turned on, all the fluids are in the bike, so let's actually see if it starts. Well, I mean, it starts like a Honda. And that will do today for the little 600. At some stage we will go to the dyno and run it in. And when I say run it in, it and all of its siblings that we have, we may as well try and get them all done in one hit. But we've got a photo for Bike Magazine. So go out there, read Bike Magazine, get all the behind the scenes goss on these things. And we'll be back soon, do some more CBR600. Stage 2 of our Supersport prep, now we've got the bodywork and bits off it, is to bring it to black and white bikes in the wonderful depths of the Lincolnshire Wolds to run it in. We are running in before we actually take the engines out and build them into their tuned spec. The important bit for running in when you're running engines in is to basically put some mileage, some load and some heat through certain items in the engine, and especially crankshaft and bores. They're your two most important bits when you're running in, and those items are not going to get changed when we build the fast engines, and so we can do most of the running in now, and then when we finally build them we'll give them a few gentle miles before we do the first bit of mapping. There is, however, a very specific Honda routine for running engines in, which I'll show you now. In the kit manual, it tells you exactly how to run the engine in, and frankly the first stage, 5,000 RPM at 4 kilowatts, which is about 3 horsepower, for 10 minutes. I've had the bike running a few times outside the workshop, just warming through a few times, so I'm going to ignore the first line completely anyway. The rest of them will be done. Whether we trim some of the times down is yet to be decided, but I've had to convert the kilowatts to horsepower, so apparently the last stage is 15,000 RPM at 107 horsepower for 20 minutes, and that is at nearly full throttle. It's saying 50 degrees throttle opening in the kit manual, and they only go to I think 59, so that's basically flat out for 20 minutes, which seems quite offensive to me, but if that's what Honda say, then that's what we do. So even though we're going to take everything apart and change the electronics, the exhaust system, the engine spec, the air filter, pretty much everything how this bike is going to run is going to be changed. But there are some quite interesting things to find on here. The torque curve, it's not bad. There's a couple of little lumps in it, but it's not too bad. It's relatively smooth. The power curve obviously has the lumps of accentuated because of how it runs. But there are a couple of interesting points. Down here, air-fuel ratio. Low RPM stuff, 4,500, 6,000 RPM, where it goes through the emissions tests. It's really lean. That's pretty normal for most stuff, and to be honest, you don't want stuff running rich down here because it just starts dirtying up spark plugs and stuff like that, makes them feel flat. So it is lean. I suspect at 4,000 RPM at part throttles it's horrendously lean to get it through the emissions, but that's the normal thing, and this was wide open throttle. But then of course it goes correct about there, and then everywhere down here is rich, like we're talking really rich, 11.5 on your air fuel ratio. That is spectacularly rich. And basically that's get it through the emissions regs here, protect it down here. So even if you've got pretty poor petrol or somebody's put different exhaust or a different air filter or something in it, this will protect it because it's firing in more fuel than it needs, which cools your combustion temperatures down. So yes, bad, okay. The other thing that we ought to look at is power figures. Honda claim 119 horsepower as standard of these bikes. Ours says 95 horsepower, but that's a little bit false because that's what it actually reads. That's the most true dyno figure you can have, is 95 horsepower. That's actually what it makes. But if we tick the box up here that says Dynojet corrected horsepower, 109 horsepower. Basically, that is the almost industry standard for horsepower readings, and that in effect gives you a calculated figure for what it's realistically doing at the crank or whatever. So it's not actually even rear wheel horsepower, even though it's measured there. Once you tick that, it puts in basically a fudge factor. But everybody everywhere uses that, so we're using it. And then we've also got SAE. SAE is like the ACU standard for reading power. But if we go to DIN, which is a different correction factor, we've got 112 horsepower. So Honda's 119 we're definitely not getting to, but 112 for a standard road bike, I'd say, is pretty healthy. So now that we've finished at black and white bikes, with this one at least, we need to get back to the workshop and actually take it apart and start upgrading it. So building bikes to take on the elite of British Championship motorcycle racing may seem like a big enough challenge on its own. But to make life slightly more difficult, I've decided to take on a second challenge. So while Rob is inside the workshop working on something new and nice and shiny, I'm doing something a little bit different. And it involves a bike with, shall we say, a little more age to it. It's a CB600. It's from 1997, it's not had an MOT in over 10 years, and it needs a little bit of love. But on the 21st of June, along with a band of other crazed lunatics, I'm going to be riding that from Land's End to John O'Groats, without any motorways, ideally in a day. That is going to be a challenge, which is why it's called the Longest Day Challenge. And it is in aid of Cancer Research UK, because we all know cancer sucks and we should do absolutely everything we can to fight against it and try and find a cure. So that is why I'm going to take a small old Honda and attempt to ride it almost 1,000 miles in a day. And if I actually expand on that, I need to ride it down to Land's End and back from John O'Groats in another couple of days. So in fact, in 3 days, I'm going to be doing basically 2,000 miles on that little Honda. And what I want you to do is help me out by giving some money to Cancer Research UK so that me and that feel like we're doing this and really doing something good. Because with your money and that old Honda, we are going to fight against cancer. So if you want to give cancer the middle finger, click on the link in the corner, give me some money, get involved in the fight. And there is also a whole series on me actually getting this ready, and so I'll put a link to that in a corner as well, and you can join us for the whole journey on something that is slightly older and slightly crappier than the nice things that are inside the workshop. So we are finally back in the workshop actually stripping the CBR600 completely. There has been a bit of a wait because part supply has been a little bit slow on some things, and there wasn't a lot of point in ripping the bike apart if we couldn't actually get it built. But Rob is now on with it. So tell me, Rob, what have you done so far this morning?
Well, so far we have dropped the fluids out of it, so water out the radiator, oil out of the engine, and all the brake fluid out, so that we can start to remove those things. We can get all the brake lines off. We're literally going to strip this bike to nothing so that we can build it up as a proper race bike.
Right, when Rob says we're going to strip it completely, we're talking, today we're going to get it down to frame, engine, swinging arm, subframe in it, but we'll have the forks out, the shock out, the wheels out, the brakes off it, the wiring loom out of it, airbox, all of that stuff is coming out in it.
It's going to look a little bit sorry for itself by the end of today, but once we start getting the performance upgrades on it, she'll be happy.
Right, to begin with, we're not actually taking the engine out straight away because we are still waiting on a delivery date for the engine kits from Honda to turn it into a really, really fast bike. And that is getting a little bit nervous, if we're honest, because we're filming this in the middle of February and we'd like to be going testing in the next few weeks. And we have absolutely no idea at the moment when our engine kits are turning up.
Yeah, we're a little bit behind schedule, aren't we, really? But due to no fault of our own. But it's not a problem. We'll have it done. We'll have it done. We'll be ready to go testing. We'll be ready. As long as we get the parts.
So we do have the majority of the stuff either here or coming for it already. We are just a little bit cautious about when our engines are going to be done. But, well, we can't deal with that yet. So, Rob, crack on.
Go!
Before we actually start taking any more of the bits of bike apart, Rob is machining up spacers. Actually machining up an adapter to go in our front paddock stand. We love our Harris paddock stands, but you can't buy them anymore. And so when we get something in that requires a different adapter to fit in the headstock, we have to make them. Luckily, we have a lathe, and it's good fun turning metal into swarf. Rob! What have you done to our lovely CBR600?
Hello, Dave.
You've made it into a pile of bits.
Nice to see you come out of the office for a change. Is it warmed up?
It has actually quite nicely.
Yeah, good, yeah.
So, moving on.
Yeah.
How nicely is the little Honda coming apart? Is it just a dream that's falling apart on its own?
Not quite. It's a little bit tricky in places because it's quite compact, a lot of this, especially like the... sorry, I've hit your camera there. The ABS lines, and everything is wedged right under there, which we still haven't got out yet, but we will do. But pretty much most of it is all the looms off now. Airbox, throttle bodies, not the rear subframe, but all the gubbins that go in there are all off. So another hour or so, and I think we'll be about stripped as much as we need to strip. And I'm keeping my clothes on.
Thank the Lord for that. I nearly swore on live,
Did you?
Not live YouTube.
You can Jeff off, is what
Exactly.
you can do.
Right, you better get back to work. I need to get back in the office and order more parts. Yay!
Cooled down again. Have you cooled down?
Yeah, it is a bit cold out here, Rob. Yeah.
Right.
Because the basic layout of this bike dates back, early 2000s, actually the 2003 bike, if you sit them side by side, isn't massively different, but this bike really goes back to 2007. The engine and bits and the chassis haven't really changed significantly in that time. But the amount of emissions control and electronics have changed, and so some of the stuff's quite interesting. Buried down here is the bracket that holds the ABS pump on, which sort of sits in the back of the frame. And even better than that, the charcoal canister for the emissions is up there, just in front of the shock absorber. I'm assuming Honda put that in there before they attach anything else to the frame. So getting it out might be a job for when we take the engine out, or when we take the swinging arm out, or when Rob gets his big hammer out. And at the end of day one of actually really taking stuff apart, Rob has really taken everything apart. In theory, we could take the engine out because that is going to come out before it actually next runs again, because it won't actually run on the Mectronic ECU and loom, because the other side cover and the pickup and stuff is different. But when we start routing the wiring loom and bits into it, we can actually get everything assembled and routed and basically built back up, knowing where the engine's sitting exactly. So we're leaving it in for now purely because it's going to make the next stage of the build a bit easier. Laid out on the bench are a selection of things we are going to be reusing. It's not including that because we don't want a big heavy battery, and it's not all of the steering damper, but it might be the actuator arm. But on here we have bolts. We're going to need some of those. Throttle bodies, although they will be modded to take some of the emission stuff out of them. Standard front calipers we're going to be reusing. Airbox and top injectors we're reusing. The actual bell mouths will be getting changed, but we might need some of the fasteners off them, so they're staying for now. Wheel speed sensors, little rear mudguarded bit, clutch perch, the standard mass cylinder we might have to build the bike with to begin with, depending on what time when the Brembos turn up, but the handlebars aren't staying. So that's it. We have a bench with a few bits on it, including the bull-throw bike, and in the corner a great big box of stuff we definitely don't need. If you need a standard wiring loom, a full set of standard road fairings, some standard exhaust pipe bits, clock bracket, anything like that off a standard Honda, let us know, because we have stock.
It's a good day, good positive day. It feels like the first proper day of Rapid Honda being a Supersport team. Now we've got this this completely stripped, and yeah, it's exciting. I'm ready to get it built up now.
So the next stage will be to get the wiring loom into it. We can get the fork kit fitted, the shock fitted, and a few other bits as and when they turn up. But yeah, we are now actually into the build stage.
We are at long last, and it feels like we are making good progress. But it's getting dark outside now, Dave, and I've seen enough of you today, so I'm going home.
Oh, okay, Rob. Pleasure seeing you. At least your head's nice and warm in that Obsession Engineering hat.
Now in blue and gold, or yellow, whichever you want to call it.
Yeah, I think everyone watching should get on obsessionengineering.co.uk and get themselves a woolly hat or a t-shirt. What do you think, Rob?
People have got too much time on their hands, haven't they?
Bye, Rob.